Hi there, my name is Kendra Sticka and I am the instructor for DN 475 Advanced Nutrition. I just wanted to record a short intro to the course just to give you a little bit of an overview of how the course is structured, what to expect, and just kind of some basic information to get you started. So first of all, welcome to DN 475. As we move through this course, I wanted to give you sort of an idea of the basic course concept of how I have this course designed. So really, nutrient metabolism is the topic of the course. It's called Advanced Nutrition, but a lot of the content revolves really around nutrient metabolism. So we'll really be looking at how nutrients are processed and utilized by the body. There will be a lot of metabolic pathways covered. However, as we're looking at this, we want to keep it in the context of health and nutrition. So when we think about various areas of metabolism, we'll look at how disease states, environment, genetics, and other factors affect how our bodies process these nutrients. From a healthcare perspective, that's one thing I really want you to consider when you think about assessing nutrient needs or developing nutrition prescriptions. It's also an opportunity to really intervene with nutrition. So one example here, if a person smokes, we know they have a higher requirement for vitamin C. Another example, when someone has hemochromatosis, they don't break down and excrete iron. So these are factors that we would need to consider when we're making recommendations related to food and or dietary supplements. So those are the types of things we'll kind of look at a metabolic pathway and then how it impacts health. So there's really, a variety of areas that this can come into play. Another classic nutrition example is, for example, the disease PKU or phenylketonuria. When a person has that disease, they're unable to metabolize phenylalanine. So that buildup of phenylalanine could cause serious health problems, even including mental retardation. So from a nutrition perspective, we would then have to think about that metabolic process and how we can provide just enough phenylalanine for growth, but not so much that it would build up and cause health problems. So really in this schematic that I have on the screen, looking at nutrient metabolism at the center, we can think about the things on the left, such as diseases, environment, genetic influences, or other aspects that might affect how the body metabolizes nutrients, and then how there might be health-related problems surrounding that. And then hopefully, again, thinking about, okay, then what can we do about it? So this is kind of just a general idea of how I have the course set up. In terms of some of the more, I guess, nitty-gritty of the course, this is just a snippet of the last page of the syllabus. I would ask that you really read through the syllabus. A lot of it has some of the fairly standard requirements and information, but I do want you to read through that. A couple things in this last page, and the snippet kind of only has some of the lines of the table, but anyway, it gives you a general idea. You can look on the printed syllabus. But I just wanted to highlight a couple of things for you that hopefully will be helpful as you're moving through. So of course we have the weeks and the dates for each of the topics covered, the basic topic, and the reading from the textbook is listed there. In the learning units, and I'll talk about that in a minute, I will often have some supplemental readings or application. One thing that I think is really critical in this class is that you start to be able to use this information to better understand research literature that's out there. So publications, studies that are published that have this information in them. So often I will use some sort of a paper or a study just to kind of give you an example of how that information we're learning might be written up in a journal that you might want to read and then think about the application of that. So the textbook readings give you a nice base. I will say this textbook it's pretty heavy content, heavy reading for this class, so I definitely would allow yourself plenty of time for the reading, and I would also suggest breaking it up a little bit. I think it's difficult to sit down and read some of these chapters in one sitting and really get the most out of them. So I would really recommend scheduling your time for this class to be broken up into at least twice, 2 different times, maybe 3 different times during the week to work on course material, because I think it's the type of material that is difficult to just sit down and do in one long sitting. The next column is exams, discussions, and other. I'll talk a bit about the discussion assignment, I guess, that we'll use in this class. But this column has those deadlines and the midterm and final exam. There will also be very short, like 5-question quizzes most weeks of class. That's not listed here, but those will be required, and that'll be listed each week on the sort of to-do items in the learning unit. And then I have one other column on the right. One of the major assignments for this class is a research paper, but I have many deadlines throughout the course for sort of building up your writing for that paper. So I have those research paper deadlines listed here. They are really to help you sort of plan your time in researching, getting good background for your research paper. And they're also a way for you and I to have kind of a check-in and make sure things are on track. And if you need feedback, certainly anytime you need feedback, I'm happy to give that. But this is kind of a structured time that I can look kind of where you are, what progress you're making, what your topic is, where you're searching for literature. So if I need to kind of help guide you a little bit, I can do that before your final paper is due. So you'll see in the syllabus that these mini assignments aren't worth a lot of points, but I really want you to be doing them so that you can benefit from the feedback on them as you move forward, because then the research paper is worth a lot of points. So if you don't get that feedback throughout, I think you sort of risk not getting the feedback you need before you turn in that research paper. So those little deadlines are really important, and so I put those on the syllabus. As you read through the syllabus, definitely feel free to let me know if there's any questions, anything that's not clear. Please don't ever hesitate to let me know. In terms of assignments for the class, this slide lists the major assignments, graded items. So as I just mentioned, most weeks will have a quiz. So how I have actually, I'm going to jump forward a minute to the course setup, and then I'll go back to assignments. Maybe this helps it flow a little bit more. How I have the course set up is that each week you will have a learning unit. So some of you have had class with me before, and so you're familiar with, I use this sort of structure in most of my classes, but you'll have a learning unit, and that's really where the core content for the class is. So it's kind of, I guess, the grounding place. I think that's where to really look for that weekly information, what you need to do for that week, what the materials are for that week is in that weekly learning unit. Within the learning unit, each week I will have some learning objectives. One thing for this class, however, is that it really builds substantially on content that you've had in prerequisite coursework. So what I've done is in the learning unit, you'll have the learning objectives that really focus on what we're covering in this class, but then I will have a Word document that has some key information that you've already covered in prerequisite coursework, but you may want to refresh on. That content is also covered in your textbook, but it should at least be somewhat familiar. But I know the type of material in this class, usually it takes some repetition. And so this is the opportunity to sort of let you know what my expectation is of your prerequisite coursework information that you have kind of fresh in your mind as we move forward. And hopefully really what we'll be able to do is sort of take some of that background information and then build on it and really look at the nutrition applications. So each week you'll have the learning objectives, then you'll have a Word document with kind of those key prerequisite background information, content things that I want you to make sure you're familiar with. And then you'll have the core materials for that week. And that could be anything from a recorded lecture by me to videos. Sometimes there's some great videos out there. So if there's something I really like, I'll use that rather than re-recording it. Again, sometimes I'll put supplemental reading. Primarily, I would say when I do that, it's a journal article, those types of things. And then you'll find the quiz for weeks that they're assigned under the exams and quizzes link. When you go to the learning units each week, right up front, you'll see a little things to do list. So that will always include all of the key due dates for the week, basically anything you need to do for that week. So the next bullet item here in terms of course setup, we'll have these weekly learning units, and then we have one of your major assignments is a discussion assignment that I'll talk about in just a minute. And it's really more, you'll take turns presenting information and then discussing and interacting about it. But I wanted to note that you need to pay really close attention to those deadlines. I will assign people different weeks for presenting and responding and those kinds of things. But you want to look at that. I'll make sure those assignments are done by week 2 of the class. I make my wait just a week or so we can make sure all the adds and drops are finished, and then make those assignments. But everyone will have a unique due date, so it's critical that you know when your due dates are, mark it on your calendar, whatever you need to do to remember. Again, the syllabus schedule at the end has due dates for the major assignments and exams for the class. So now I'll jump back to that assignment slide that were looking at. Again, the quizzes on most weeks will really cover the background and prerequisite course content that I'm expecting you're building on. They will be open book, open note, however they are quizzes, so I am expecting that you don't share answers with each other, that you don't tell someone else what's on the quiz, that sort of thing. I have a 20-minute time limit, so it is something that I want you to review through the information, the background information in those Word documents, so you have that kind of close at hand and can quickly reference it. You certainly can reference it, but you want to have that organized. Typically, these will be about 5 multiple choice questions on a quiz, depending as we're moving along. If I feel like there's something else that may be a better little way to just kind of check in and make sure you're good with the background information, I may do something a little bit different, but it won't be a huge number of points. It won't be a huge amount of content, just a little check-in and help you keep on track. Again, the research paper is the major assignment for the class, and the mini deadlines along the way that I mentioned. RefWorks is a program that if you haven't used it yet or aren't familiar with it, I would very much recommend it. There is also Write and Cite that goes along with RefWorks, which basically RefWorks allows you to put references in there, and then it will build a bibliography or reference list for you according to whatever format is required. So for this class, I'm requiring AMA formatting. It's a really, really handy tool. As you edit your paper, it will automatically update your references, things like that. So it takes a little bit of time to learn, but I think if you haven't done it yet, this would be a fantastic time to start that. And then the other thing in the research paper, I just want to make sure to point out, by this point in your academic career, I am assuming that you're comfortable with avoiding plagiarism, but sometimes that's a little more gray than it would seem. So please, please, if you don't feel comfortable in that area, let me know. There's some great library resources. Often this comes into play when it's unintentional, but that still is plagiarism. So it is really important that you feel comfortable how to appropriately cite resources, when you need to use quotation marks, when you need to put things, you can't just even reword someone's thoughts into different words without giving that credit. So really important in this stage that you're extremely comfortable with that and careful with it. So don't hesitate to ask if you have questions. Exams. There will be one midterm and one final exam. They will be online in Blackboard, but they will be proctored. So you need to set up a proctor for those exams. They're going to be open book and open note, but they will be timed. So again, you'll need to have your resources organized. And I'm not allowing electronic resources, including ebooks. It's just too difficult to manage what is being used with those resources. So if you have an ebook, you are not going to have access to that during the exam. So just something to consider there. And then this final item for assignments, this discussion, and I have it in quotes because it's different than a lot of how discussion is often used in online classes. This is really one of the key assignments and key elements to the weekly content in this class. I hope this is a really valuable piece where we start to think about and look at nutrition application of the various topics. So we are going to use a program called VoiceThread. It is free to use. There's a UAA version of it, as well as, within UAA or outside of UAA, you can use either one. But essentially, I have a couple exercises in class to help you start to get familiar with it. But basically, you will each be assigned 1 week that you are the presenter and facilitator, where you will develop a presentation to a fairly involved discussion question. And then you'll be assigned 4 other weeks throughout the semester that you are what I'm calling a commenter, where you respond to the person who presented, ask follow-up questions, bring in additional ideas, those sorts of things. And then some weeks you won't be assigned anything. However, Every single voice thread discussion, I am expecting that everybody listen to them and think about them. I consider that required course content. It's really, again, an opportunity for you guys to take some of the opportunities to present some of the application content. At the end of each discussion, after they're finished, I will summarize with some follow-up thoughts. I'll highlight key information if there was anything that I thought might be either not quite accurate or just perhaps misinterpreted. I'll try my best to make sure that's clarified. So this is really a key element of the class. We'll have one early in the class that'll be kind of a practice dry run, so you'll get to see what it sort of looks like or feels like without having it have a heavy weighting. Again, you'll each be assigned those weeks after about the first couple weeks of class by the end of the second week, just kind of depending if we're having any shifting in numbers. So those are the key assignments. I went through the course setup again, and then just let me know if you have questions or concerns anywhere along the way in class. It's really important that you communicate with me and let me know if there's something you need. If something isn't clear, I am always happy to touch base, to brainstorm about things if it's related to your research paper, for example, to answer questions that come up with the learning units or any of those types of things. But I just really rely on you communicating with me and letting me know if you have questions or if anything isn't clear. So with that, welcome to class. This week I have just kind of the intro unit, and then I have the week 1 unit on the cell, which is not too long, so hopefully you can kind of get in the groove in this first week, and then the second week we'll start jumping into a little bit more content. So again, welcome, glad to have you in class.